The billionaire's daughter hadn't eaten in 2 weeks until the old maid did the impossible. The silence in the penthouse was not peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and smelled faintly of antiseptic and despair. To Ethan Blackwood, a man who could buy entire city blocks with a single signature, the silence sounded like a countdown. "I need you to understand the severity of the situation, Mr. Blackwood, Doctor," Evans said, his voice low and practiced, lacking the genuine warmth Ethan desperately craved. The doctor stood in the center of the nursery, a room painted in soft pastels that should have been filled with laughter, not the rhythmic, terrifying beep of a portable heart monitor. Ethan stood by the window, his back to the doctor. He was 35, impeccable in a charcoal bespoke suit, but his reflection in the glass showed a man who had aged 10 years in 10 days. His eyes were hollow, rimmed with red exhaustion. "Don't give me medical jargon, Evans. Just tell me." "It's failure to thrive," the doctor sighed, closing the file. "Since your wife's passing, Lily has simply given up. Psychologically, she has shut down. The feeding tubes are keeping her hydrated, but her body is rejecting nutrients. She hasn't swallowed solid food in 14 days. If she doesn't eat voluntarily within the next 48 hours, her organs will begin to shut down. We will have to hospitalize her permanently, and frankly, given her emotional state, she might not survive the stress of the transfer." Ethan turned around, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. "She is 2 years old. A baby doesn't just give up. A baby who lost her mother does," Evans said softly. "I'm sorry, Ethan. Keep trying with the nurses. But prepare yourself." When the doctor left, the room felt even colder. Ethan walked to the crib. Lily, his daughter, looked tiny against the white linens. Her red curls, usually a fiery halo, looked dull. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. She was awake, staring at the mobile spinning above her, but her eyes were empty. "Lily," Ethan whispered, reaching out to stroke her cheek. She didn't react. She didn't blink. She was fading away right in front of him. "Please, baby, just one bite. For Daddy." He picked up the silver spoon on the nightstand, dipping it into a bowl of expensive organic puree prepared by a Michelin-star private chef. He brought it to her lips. Lily turned her head away sluggishly, her small hand pushing his wrist with weak defiance. Ethan dropped the spoon. It clattered loudly against the tray, the sound echoing like a gunshot. He sank into the armchair and buried his face in his hands. He possessed billions, yet he was the poorest man alive. "Mr. Blackwood?" Ethan looked up. His butler, reliable and stoic, stood in the doorway. "The candidates are here, sir. The agency sent over the emergency replacements." "Send them in," Ethan said, standing up and buttoning his jacket, composing his mask of authority, one by one. The next 2 hours were a parade of incompetence masked as professionalism. There was Mrs. Gable, a stern woman with 30 years of pediatric experience who tried to force the spoon into Lily's mouth until the baby gagged and screamed silently. Ethan fired her on the spot. Then there was Miss Clare, a young nurse who burst into tears when she saw how frail Lily was. Ethan dismissed her too. He didn't need pity, he needed a miracle. By 4 p.m., the rain was lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the New York skyline. The room was darkening. "Is that all of them?" Ethan asked, his voice cracking. "There is one more, sir." The butler hesitated. She isn't from the agency. She saw the private listing online. She doesn't have the specialized medical certifications the others had." "I don't care about certificates anymore," Ethan snapped. "Send her in." When Sarah walked in, the atmosphere in the room shifted imperceptibly. She wasn't what Ethan expected. She was young, 25 at most, with a natural, unpretentious beauty that seemed out of place in the sterile luxury of the Blackwood estate. She wore a simple beige coat that had seen better days, damp from the rain, and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical, messy bun. Her eyes, however, were striking, large, expressive, and filled with a warmth that seemed to defy the gloom of the house. She didn't look at the expensive art on the walls or the panoramic view. Her eyes went immediately to the crib. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice soft but steady, "I'm Sarah." Ethan looked her over with skepticism. "You're young. Do you have experience with trauma cases? My daughter is starving herself to death." "I have experience with sadness, sir," Sarah replied, taking a step closer, "and I know that sometimes medicine tastes like poison when your heart is broken." Ethan frowned. It was a strange thing to say. She needs to eat, not poetry. "Can you make her eat?" "I can try," Sarah said, "but I need you to leave the room." "Excuse me," Ethan bristled. "I don't leave my daughter with strangers." "You've been hovering over her for weeks, haven't you?" Sarah challenged him gently. "Stressing over every calorie, staring at her with terror in your eyes every time she refuses. She feels your fear, Mr. Blackwood. It's making her anxious. She needs calm. Please, give me 20 minutes. Ethan looked at Lily, then back at Sarah. He saw a quiet confidence in the young woman's posture. He had no other options. 20 minutes, Ethan warned, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "If she is crying when I come back, you're out." Ethan walked out of the room, leaving the heavy oak door slightly ajar. He paced the hallway outside, his heart hammering against his ribs. Every minute felt like an hour. He expected to hear the usual sounds: the clang of a spoon, the frustrated sighs of a nanny, the weak whimpering of his daughter. But there was nothing. 5 minutes passed, 10, 15. The silence was different now. It wasn't the heavy silence of death, it was a hushed, expectant stillness. Ethan couldn't take it anymore. At the 18-minute mark, his anxiety boiled over. What if something had happened? What if this unqualified girl had hurt her? He stormed toward the door, pushing it open with force. "Sarah, what is going—" The words died in his throat. He froze in the doorway, his hand flying to his mouth to stifle a gasp. The scene before him was something out of a dream. They weren't in the nursery anymore. Sarah had moved Lily to the small dining nook by the balcony. The harsh overhead lights were off. The only illumination came from the soft blue twilight filtering through the rain-streaked windows and a few candles Sarah must have found. Sarah was sitting on a dining chair, holding Lily securely in her lap. She wasn't wearing the stiff nanny uniform the agency required. She had taken off her coat and was just in a simple white blouse. But it was what was happening that stopped Ethan's heart. On the white marble table sat a plate with a simple golden waffle. Not the organic green sludge the doctors recommended, a waffle. Sarah was humming a low, melodic tune, swaying gently back and forth. She broke off a tiny piece of the waffle, dipped it in a drop of syrup, and brought it to her own mouth first. She smiled, making a sound of delight. Then she offered a piece to Lily. Ethan watched, paralyzed, as his daughter, the child who had fought off doctors and nurses for 2 weeks, slowly opened her mouth. Sarah placed the waffle on the baby's tongue. Lily didn't spit it out. She chewed slowly. She swallowed. Then the impossible happened. Lily's tiny hand reached out, grabbing Sarah's finger, and she pointed at the waffle, asking for more. Ethan felt tears rushing to his eyes, hot and blinding. He leaned against the doorframe, his legs trembling. He watched as Sarah fed his daughter another piece, then another. The young woman wiped a crumb from Lily's chin with her thumb, her expression one of pure, motherly tenderness. For the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a home. Sarah looked up and saw him standing there, weeping silently. She didn't look triumphant or arrogant. She simply smiled, a warm, reassuring smile that seemed to say, "It's okay. She's okay." Ethan realized in that moment that he wasn't looking at an employee. He was looking at the woman who had just saved his life. The sound of the spoons scraping against the empty plate was the loudest thing in the room, but to Ethan, it was a symphony. "She finished it," Ethan whispered, stepping fully into the room. His voice was hoarse. "She actually finished it." Sarah gently wiped Lily's face with a cloth napkin. The baby was looking sleepy now, the food coma finally setting in after weeks of starvation. Her head rested against Sarah's chest, her breathing deep and rhythmic. "She was hungry," Sarah said softly, keeping her voice low so as not to startle the child. "She just didn't want to be a patient anymore. She wanted to be a little girl." Ethan walked over to the table. He looked at Sarah with a mixture of awe and confusion. Up close, he could see the fatigue in Sarah's eyes too. She looked like someone who had walked a long way to get here. But her hold on Lily was rock solid. "How?" Ethan asked, pulling out a chair and sitting opposite them. "The best specialists in the country couldn't get her to open her mouth. You walk in off the street with no equipment, and 20 minutes later she's eating waffles. What is your secret?" Sarah looked down at Lily, brushing a red curl away from the baby's forehead. "My mother used to say that food is only half ingredients. The other half is the memory of who fed it to you. Those nurses, they were treating a disease. They were scared of her fragility. Lily could feel their anxiety. She hesitated, looking up at the billionaire. "I treated her like she was my own. I ate with her. I showed her it was safe." Ethan stared at her. It was so simple, yet he had been so blind. He had been trying to throw money at the problem, hiring degrees and certifications, when what his daughter needed was warmth. "You're hired," Ethan said firmly. Sarah blinked. "Sir, we haven't discussed—" "I don't care what you want. Name your price," Ethan interrupted, leaning forward. "Double whatever you made at your last job. Live in. Full benefits. Just don't leave, please." Sarah saw the desperation in the handsome man's eyes. This wasn't a business transaction. It was a father begging for his daughter's survival. She nodded slowly. "I'll stay, but not for the money, Mr. Blackwood. I need this job, yes, but I can't leave her now either." The next 2 weeks were a transformation. It was as if someone had opened the curtains in a dark room. Sarah moved into the guest wing, but she spent her days in the nursery and the garden. Under her care, Lily bloomed. The color returned to her cheeks. She gained weight. The silence of the house was replaced by the sounds of nursery rhymes, and eventually the golden sound of a toddler's giggle. Ethan found himself coming home earlier from the office. He told himself it was to check on Lily, but deep down, he knew he was drawn to the warmth Sarah radiated. He would stand in the doorway, watching Sarah chase Lily around the living room, pretending to be a monster, her laughter mingling with the baby's. Sarah was 25, vibrant and full of life. She wasn't just a nanny, she became the heart of the household. She wore simple jeans and sweaters, her hair always loose and smelling of vanilla. Ethan found himself smiling for the first time since his wife's funeral. He started eating dinner with them, the three of them sitting at the kitchen table rather than the formal dining room. But happiness in the Blackwood estate was a fragile thing, and it was about to be tested. On a Tuesday evening, the sound of a high-performance engine roaring up the driveway shattered the peace. Ethan was in his study, reviewing contracts, while Sarah was reading a bedtime story to Lily upstairs. The front door swung open. The clicking of sharp stilettos on the marble floor echoed through the foyer. "Ethan, darling, where are you?" Ethan stiffened. He recognized that voice immediately. It was Isabella, his fiancée, or rather, the woman he had been dating on and off, whom the tabloids insisted was his fiancée. She was a socialite, 30 years old, stunningly beautiful in a sharp, predatory way, and obsessed with appearances. She had been traveling in Europe during the worst of Lily's illness, claiming she couldn't handle the negative energy of a sick house. Ethan walked out to the balcony overlooking the foyer. "I'm here, Isabella. You're back early." Isabella looked up, flashing a perfect veneered smile. She dropped her designer bags for the butler to collect. "I couldn't stay away. I missed you terribly. And how is the little one?" The pause before little one was slight but telling. "She is recovering," Ethan said, walking down the stairs. "Miraculously." "That's nice," Isabella said dismissively, walking up to kiss him. Her lips were cold. "I need a drink." Milan was exhausting. Just then, Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs. She was holding an empty milk bottle, wearing a slightly oversized grey cardigan and leggings. She looked cozy, domestic, and effortlessly beautiful. Isabella pulled away from Ethan, her eyes narrowing instantly as she looked up. She scanned Sarah from head to toe. The youth, the beauty, the undeniable comfort she seemed to have in the house. "And who," Isabella asked, her voice dropping a few degrees, "is this?" "This is Sarah," Ethan said, gesturing for Sarah to come down. "She's the new nanny. She saved Lily's life." Sarah walked down the stairs, offering a polite smile. "Good evening, Mom." Isabella didn't smile back. She looked at Ethan, a flicker of jealous rage igniting behind her eyes. She had expected an old woman, a matron, a nurse in a uniform. She hadn't expected a 25-year-old stunner who looked like she belonged in a magazine, standing comfortably in her future husband's home. "A nanny," Isabella scoffed, circling Sarah like a shark. "You look barely out of school. Do you even have a degree, or did Ethan hire you for other assets?" "Isabella, stop," Ethan warned, his voice low. "I was hired because I could help Lily eat," Sarah replied calmly, though her cheeks flushed pink. "It's nice to meet you, Miss Vance, to you," Isabella snapped. She turned her back on Sarah, facing Ethan. "Well, I'm back now. We can return to normal. You won't need so much help around the house." "Sarah stays," Ethan said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "She is essential to Lily's recovery." Isabella's jaw tightened. She saw the way Ethan looked at the maid, protective, appreciative. She saw the way Sarah looked at him, with shy respect. It made Isabella's blood boil. She had spent years trying to lock down the Blackwood fortune. She wasn't going to let some charity case with a pretty face steal it from under her nose. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house grew toxic. Isabella didn't attack Sarah openly in front of Ethan. She was smarter than that. She used subtle warfare. She would leave huge messes and demand Sarah clean them up, treating her like a maid rather than a governess. "Oops, I spilled my wine. Clean that up, dear. That's what you're paid for, isn't it?" She would criticize Sarah's methods. "Ethan, don't you think she's too familiar with the baby? Lily needs discipline, not coddling. She's raising a brat." But the breaking point began to form on Friday night. Ethan had to attend a charity gala. He wanted to stay home, but Isabella insisted they go to make a power couple appearance. "You look beautiful, Sarah," Lily babbled in her toddler language as Sarah tucked her in. Ethan, standing in the doorway in his tuxedo, overheard. He looked at Sarah, who was wearing her simple pajamas, stroking Lily's hair. He felt a pang of longing he couldn't explain. "She's right," Ethan said unexpectedly. "You have a way with her, Sarah. Thank you." Sarah looked up, locking eyes with him. For a moment, the air between them crackled with an unspoken attraction. From the hallway, hidden in the shadows, Isabella watched them. She saw the spark. She saw the threat. Isabella walked into her bedroom and opened her jewelry safe. She pulled out a diamond watch, a limited edition piece worth more than a house. She held it in her hand, her reflection in the mirror twisting into a cruel smirk. "You think you can play house with my billionaire," Isabella whispered to herself. "Let's see how much he loves you when he thinks you're a thief and a monster." She slipped the watch into her pocket and headed toward the nursery, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The trap was set. The charity gala was a suffocating affair of flashing cameras, fake smiles, and champagne that tasted like ash in Ethan's mouth. Throughout the speeches and the auctions, his mind drifted back to the mansion, specifically to the image of Sarah sitting on the nursery rug, building a castle of blocks with Lily. He missed them. He realized with a jolt of panic that he didn't just miss his daughter, he missed the peace Sarah brought to his life. "You're distracted," Isabella hissed, pinching his arm as they posed for a photo. Her diamond earrings caught the strobe lights, but her eyes were cold. "Stop looking at your phone." "It's rude." "I'm checking on Lily," Ethan replied, pulling away. "I have a bad feeling." "The nanny is there." Isabella rolled her eyes. "Unless you don't trust her, you shouldn't. She's too pretty to be a good worker. Distracted girls make mistakes." Ethan ignored her, but the seed of doubt was planted. Isabella was a master at that, finding a crack in the armor and wedging a knife in. They returned to the estate just after midnight. The house was quiet. Outside a storm was brewing, the wind howling through the manicured gardens, stripping the leaves from the trees. As they entered the foyer, Isabella suddenly gasped, clutching her wrist. "My watch! Ethan, my watch is gone!" Ethan frowned, tired and wanting to just go upstairs. "You probably left it in the car, Isabella, or on the vanity before we left." "No!" she insisted, her voice rising in pitch. "I had it on when we walked in. I took it off for a second in the kitchen to wash my hands because, oh my God." She covered her mouth, her eyes widening in theatrical horror. She was there, the girl, Sarah. "Don't be ridiculous," Ethan snapped. "Sarah is not a thief." "Isn't she?" Isabella countered, walking toward the staff quarters, which were adjacent to the kitchen. "She's poor, Ethan. Desperate. You said it yourself. She begged for the job. That watch is worth $200,000. That's a lifetime of wages for someone like her." "I'm not letting you accuse her without proof," Ethan said, following her. They found Sarah in the kitchen, warming up milk. She looked startled as Isabella stormed in, followed by a grim-faced Ethan. "Where is it?" Isabella demanded, extending her hand. "Where is what?" Sarah asked, putting the milk down. She looked at Ethan, confused. "Mr. Blackwood, is something wrong? My Patek Philippe, the diamond one. I left it on the counter 5 minutes ago. You're the only one here," Isabella accused, her voice dripping with venom. "I haven't seen any watch," Sarah said, her voice shaking slightly. "I just came down to get Lily's milk." "Then you won't mind if we check your bag," Isabella said, lunging for Sarah's worn-out canvas tote bag sitting on the chair. "Isabella, stop!" Ethan barked. But it was too late. Isabella upended the bag onto the kitchen table. Out tumbled a paperback book, a cheap wallet, some hair ties, and the glittering, unmistakable, heavy gold and diamond watch. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "No, I didn't put that there. I swear, I've never touched it." Ethan stared at the watch. His heart felt like it had stopped. The evidence was right there. He looked at Sarah, searching for the truth, but all he saw was the frantic look of a guilty person caught in the act. Or was it fear? "I told you," Isabella whispered triumphantly, moving behind Ethan. "She's a con artist, Ethan. She charmed you, charmed the baby, all to rob you blind." "Ethan, please." Sarah stepped forward, tears filling her eyes. "You know me. I love Lily. I would never steal from you." Before Ethan could answer, a piercing scream echoed from the nursery upstairs. It wasn't just a cry, it was a shriek of pain. Ethan's paternal instincts overrode everything. He turned and sprinted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, with Isabella and Sarah close behind. They burst into the nursery. Lily was standing in her crib, her face red, screaming hysterically. She was holding her arm. Ethan scooped her up, his heart pounding. "Lily, baby, what's wrong?" "She's hurt," Isabella shouted, pointing at the baby's arm. "Look, there's a bruise, a red mark." Ethan looked. On Lily's delicate upper arm, there was indeed a fresh, angry red mark. She did it, Isabella accused, pointing a manicured finger at Sarah, who had just entered the room breathless. She was probably angry that I almost caught her in the kitchen. She took it out on the child. "No!" Sarah screamed, horrified. "I would never hurt her. I love her." Ethan looked at the mark on his daughter's arm. Then he looked at the watch Isabella was holding up as proof of Sarah's character. The combination was too much. The fear of losing Lily, the stress of the past months, the betrayal, it all exploded. He handed the crying baby to Isabella and turned on Sarah. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Get out," Ethan said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "Ethan, please, listen to me." Sarah reached out. "Do not say my name," Ethan roared, the sound shaking the walls. "You steal from me? Fine, but you hurt my daughter. You are lucky I don't call the police. Get out of my house, now, before I lose control." "Mr. Blackwood, it's a lie. She's setting me up." Sarah was sobbing now, open and raw. "I saw the watch in your bag, Sarah," Ethan yelled, "and my daughter is screaming. Get out." He grabbed her arm, not roughly but with finality, and marched her to the front door. He opened it. The storm outside was raging now, rain coming down in sheets. "Ethan," Sarah whispered, shivering as the cold wind hit her. "Please, she won't eat for anyone else." She will eat because she has to," Ethan said, his eyes hard as stone. "You are fired. If you come near this property again, I will have you arrested." He slammed the huge oak door in her face. On the other side, Sarah stood in the pouring rain, soaking wet in seconds. She pressed her hand against the wood, sobbing, her heart breaking not for the job, but for the little girl she was leaving behind with a monster. Inside, Ethan leaned his forehead against the door, breathing heavily. Upstairs, Lily was still screaming. "Shh, shh, it's okay," Isabella cooed, holding the baby. But she wasn't looking at the child. She was looking at the diamond watch, smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Daddy just took out the trash, sweetie. Everything is going to be perfect now." 24 hours. That was all it took for the house to fall apart. The mansion was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence than before. It was the silence of a tomb. Ethan sat in the armchair in the nursery, staring at the crib. Lily was asleep, but it was an exhaustion-induced sleep. She had refused breakfast. She had refused lunch. She had refused dinner. When Isabella had tried to feed her that morning, Lily had swatted the spoon away violently and screamed for Sarah. When Ethan tried, she just turned her face to the mattress and whimpered. The color was draining from her cheeks again. The spark was gone. It was happening all over again, but faster this time. "She's just being stubborn," Isabella said from the doorway. She was wearing a silk robe, looking annoyed rather than concerned. "Starving herself to manipulate you. Children do that. If you give in and call that girl back, you're letting a thief win." Ethan didn't look at her. "She isn't eating, Isabella. She lost 1 pound since yesterday. Dr. Evans said her heart can't take another crash." "Well, maybe if you hadn't hired a criminal in the first place," Isabella sniffed. "I'm going to the spa. This negative energy is giving me a migraine. Call me when she stops throwing a tantrum." She left. Ethan sat alone in the darkening room. Doubt began to gnaw at him. Not about the watch, he had seen that with his own eyes, but about the bruise. Sarah had been so gentle. She had caught a spider once and carried it outside rather than killing it. Could a woman like that really pinch a baby? He rubbed his temples. He needed to know exactly what happened in the nursery before the scream. He needed to be sure. He stood up and walked to his home office. He sat down at the bank of monitors that controlled the estate's security system. He had installed high-definition cameras in every room after his wife died, a paranoia born of grief. He pulled up the footage from the previous night. Camera 4, nursery, 11:45 p.m. He watched the screen. The room was empty. Lily was sleeping peacefully. Then the door opened. Ethan leaned in, his breath catching. It wasn't Sarah. It was Isabella. On the screen, Isabella walked into the room. She was fully dressed in her gala gown. She looked around to make sure she was alone. She walked over to the crib. Ethan watched, his blood turning to ice as Isabella reached into her clutch purse. She pulled out the diamond watch. She didn't put it on. She walked to the corner where Sarah's tote bag had been left earlier in the evening, and she shoved the watch deep into the side pocket. "My God," Ethan whispered. But the video wasn't over. Isabella walked back to the crib. She looked down at the sleeping toddler. Lily stirred. Isabella leaned down. Her face was twisted in a sneer. She reached out, grabbed the fleshy part of Lily's upper arm, and twisted hard. On the screen, Lily jerked awake, her mouth opening in a silent scream before the audio kicked in. Isabella immediately stepped back, feigning shock as the door burst open and Ethan rushed in. Ethan paused the video. He stared at the frozen image of his fiancée pinching his daughter. A roar of pure, primal rage built in his chest. It started low and erupted into a shout that shattered the quiet of the office. He swept the monitor off the desk, sending it crashing to the floor. He had thrown an innocent woman out into a storm. He had called her a thief, he had terrified her, and he had left his daughter in the hands of her abuser. Ethan stood up, trembling with an anger he had never felt in his life. He marched out of the office and down the hall. Isabella was in the foyer, putting on her coat, checking her reflection in the mirror. She turned as she heard his heavy footsteps. "Oh, you're out of your cave. Did she eat?" Ethan didn't stop walking until he was inches from her face. He grabbed her arm, the same way he had grabbed Sarah's, but with none of the restraint. "You pinched her," Ethan said, his voice shaking. Isabella's eyes widened. "What? You're hurting me. Let go." "I saw the footage, Isabella," Ethan snarled, shoving her backward. "I saw you plant the watch. I saw you hurt my daughter to frame Sarah." Isabella's face went pale. The mask crumbled. "Ethan, wait, I can explain." "There is nothing to explain," Ethan screamed. "You are a monster. You tortured a baby because you were jealous of a nanny. Get out, get out." "But our engagement, the press," Isabella stammered. "If you are not off my property in 2 minutes," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "I will release that video to every news station in the world. You won't just be single, Isabella. You will be a pariah. You will be hunted." Isabella saw the look in his eyes. She knew she had lost. She grabbed her bag and ran out the door without another word. Ethan slammed the door shut. The silence returned, but now it was filled with his own guilt. "Sarah," he whispered. He ran upstairs to the nursery. Lily was awake, sitting up, looking weak. She looked at him with big, sad eyes. "Sarah?" she asked, her voice cracking. "I'm going to get her, baby," Ethan promised, kissing her forehead. "Daddy made a mistake, a big mistake. But I'm going to fix it," he called the butler. "Stay with Lily, do not leave her side." Ethan ran to the garage. He jumped into his sports car, the engine roaring to life. He remembered Sarah's file. He knew her address. It was a small, run-down apartment complex on the other side of the city. He drove like a madman, weaving through traffic, running red lights. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and grey. He pulled up to the crumbling brick building. He ran up the 3 flights of stairs, ignoring the smell of damp and old cooking. He pounded on apartment 3B. "Sarah! Sarah! Open up! It's Ethan!" Silence. He pounded again. "Sarah, please! I know the truth. I'm sorry." The door to 3C opened. An elderly woman peeked out, looking annoyed. "Stop banging, she's gone." Ethan froze. "What? Who's gone?" "The pretty girl in 3B, the neighbor said. "She came back last night soaking wet, crying her eyes out. Packed her things this morning. Said she couldn't stay in this city anymore. Too many bad memories." "Where did she go?" Ethan begged, stepping toward the woman. "Please, it's life or death." "She didn't say," the woman shrugged. "But she took the bus to the central station. Said she was going back home to the country, left about an hour ago." Ethan checked his watch. The last bus to the rural north left in 30 minutes. He turned and bolted down the stairs. He had 30 minutes to save his daughter's life, and to save the woman he was rapidly realizing he couldn't live without. The Grand Central Terminal was a chaotic labyrinth of echoing footsteps, garbled announcements, and the smell of diesel fumes mixed with stale coffee. To Ethan Blackwood, it felt like a nightmare. He sprinted through the main concourse, his Italian leather shoes slipping on the polished floor, his breathing ragged. He bumped into a businessman, knocking the man's briefcase over. "Watch it!" the man shouted. Ethan didn't stop. He didn't even turn around. "Sorry!" he yelled over his shoulder, scanning the departure boards frantically. "Bus 405, northbound, gate 14. He checked his watch. 2:58 p.m. The bus was scheduled to leave at 3 p.m. He had 2 minutes to save his family. He ran toward the lower gates, ignoring the burning sensation in his lungs. He was a man who usually commanded boardrooms with a single glance, but here he was just another desperate soul in a sea of strangers. He reached gate 14 just as the heavy pneumatic doors of the bus were beginning to hiss shut. "Wait!" Ethan screamed, waving his arms. "Stop the bus!" The driver, a burly man with a thick mustache, frowned and hit the brake. The doors wheezed open again. "Ticket?" Ethan pushed past the driver, stumbling up the steps. He scanned the rows of tired passengers, people sleeping against windows, mothers hushing crying babies, students with headphones. And then he saw her. Sarah was sitting in the very back row, pressed against the window. She was wearing the same beige coat she had arrived in weeks ago. Her head was bowed, her forehead resting against the cool glass. She looked small, defeated, and utterly alone. "Sarah," Ethan breathed, the sound barely audible over the hum of the engine. He walked down the narrow aisle. The other passengers stared at him, a man in a disheveled, expensive suit, sweating and pale, looking at the woman in the back like she was the only person on earth. Sarah sensed him before she saw him. She stiffened, slowly lifting her head. When she turned and locked eyes with him, Ethan felt his heart shatter. Her eyes were red and swollen. Her face was pale. But worse than the sadness was the look of fear. She flinched, pulling her bag closer to her chest, as if to shield herself from him. "Mr. Blackwood," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, I didn't take anything. Just let me go." Ethan dropped to his knees right there in the dirty aisle of the bus. He didn't care about his suit. He didn't care about the people watching. "I know," Ethan said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I know you didn't take it, Sarah. I saw the video." Sarah blinked, confusion warring with the pain in her eyes. "The video? I checked the security cameras," Ethan said, reaching out a hand, but stopping short of touching her, afraid he would scare her away. "I saw Isabella. I saw her plant the watch. And I saw her hurt Lily." Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Oh, God, is she okay? Is Lily okay?" "She's safe from Isabella. I threw her out," Ethan said intensely. "But she's not okay, Sarah. She's given up again. She hasn't eaten since you left. She's calling for you. She's fading." Sarah's expression crumbled. The defenses she had built up, the anger, the hurt, melted away instantly at the mention of the child. "I came to beg you," Ethan continued, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. "Not as your boss, but as a father who made the biggest mistake of his life. I was an idiot. I was blind and I was cruel. I judged you because I was afraid of losing control, and in doing so, I hurt the only person who actually brought light into my house." The bus driver cleared his throat from the front. "Hey, buddy, we gotta go. Is she getting off or are you getting on?" Ethan ignored him. He kept his eyes locked on Sarah. "Please, Sarah, come home. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you. But right now, Lily needs you." Sarah looked at him. She saw the raw vulnerability in this powerful man. She saw the regret that went bone deep. She looked out the window at the grey city, then back at Ethan. Slowly she stood up. She picked up her tote bag. "Let's go," she said softly. Ethan let out a breath he felt he had been holding for 24 hours. He stood up and took her bag. "Thank you. Thank you." The drive back to the mansion was fast, but the silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with unspoken things. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel, glancing at Sarah every few seconds, as if to make sure she hadn't evaporated. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," Ethan said quietly, as they turned onto the private road leading to the estate. "I should have known better. Isabella, she played on my insecurities, but that's no excuse for how I treated you." "Trust is hard when you have so much to lose," Sarah replied, looking out at the passing trees. "You were protecting your daughter. I understand that. But you broke my heart, Ethan. Not because you fired me, but because you thought I was capable of hurting her." "I know," Ethan swallowed hard. "I will earn that trust back, whatever it takes." When they pulled up to the front door, the house seemed to loom dark and imposing against the twilight. They didn't wait for the staff. They ran inside and straight up the stairs. The nursery was dimly lit. The butler was sitting in the corner, looking grim. He stood up as they entered, relief washing over his face when he saw Sarah. "She hasn't moved, sir," the butler whispered. Ethan stayed by the door. This was Sarah's moment. Sarah walked to the crib. Lily was lying on her back, staring blankly at the ceiling. She looked smaller than Sarah remembered, even though it had only been a day. Her skin was ashen. "Hey, Bug," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Lily's head turned slowly, her eyes focused. For a second she looked confused, like she was hallucinating. Then recognition sparked. Her bottom lip trembled. "Ra," came the weak, raspy voice. "I'm here, baby." "I'm here," Sarah said, reaching down and scooping the child into her arms. Lily buried her face in Sarah's neck and let out a long, shuddering sigh. She didn't cry. She didn't have the energy. She just clung to Sarah with a desperate strength, her tiny fingers gripping Sarah's sweater. "I missed you too," Sarah cooed, rocking her back and forth. She looked at Ethan and nodded. Ethan rushed to the small kitchenette in the nursery suite. He grabbed the prepared bowl of warm oatmeal and bananas, Lily's favorite, that had been sitting untouched for hours. He brought it to Sarah. Sarah sat down in the rocking chair, Lily still clinging to her. "Look, Lily, Daddy brought us a snack. Shall we try?" Lily looked at the spoon, then she looked at Sarah. Sarah smiled, that warm, radiant smile that made the whole room feel safe. She nodded. Lily opened her mouth. When she swallowed that first bite, Ethan felt his knees go weak. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he was sitting on the floor, watching them. He watched as Sarah fed his daughter, bite by bite, murmuring soft words of encouragement. He watched life return to his child's eyes. He realized then that he wasn't just watching a nanny. He was watching the woman he loved. 6 months later, the garden of the Blackwood estate was unrecognizable. What used to be a formal, rigid display of manicured hedges was now a riot of color. There were wildflowers, a swing set, and a small inflatable pool sitting on the perfect grass. Ethan sat on the terrace, a glass of lemonade in his hand. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing chinos and a polo shirt, his hair slightly windblown. He looked younger, lighter. "Higher, higher!" Ethan smiled as he watched Lily, now a chubby, energetic 3-year-old, soaring through the air on the swing. Pushing her was Sarah. Sarah was laughing, her hair catching the sunlight. She wore a summer dress, yellow like the waffles that had started it all. She looked happy. It hadn't been an easy road. After that night, there had been a lot of healing to do. Ethan had fired half his security staff for incompetence. He had sued Isabella for defamation and abuse, ensuring she would never come near a child again. And he had spent every single day trying to make it up to Sarah. At first, Sarah had kept it professional. She stayed for Lily. But slowly, over shared coffees in the morning and long walks in the evening, The walls came down. Ethan showed her the man beneath the billionaire, the man who liked jazz, who was afraid of thunderstorms, who loved his daughter more than breath itself. And Sarah showed him that money didn't matter, but kindness did. Ethan set his glass down and walked across the grass. Sarah slowed the swing down as Lily prepared to jump off. "Daddy, watch this!" Lily yelled, tumbling onto the grass in a clumsy somersault. 10 out of 10! Ethan cheered, clapping. Lily giggled and ran off to chase a butterfly. Ethan walked up to Sarah. He reached out and took her hand. It was a natural gesture now, easy and comfortable. "She looks great," Ethan said, watching his daughter. "She is great," Sarah corrected him, squeezing his hand. "She just needed love." Ethan turned to Sarah. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, his thumb lingering on her cheek. "We all did." Sarah smiled up at him, her eyes shining. "You saved me too, you know. I was alone in this city until I found this crazy house." "I have a question," Ethan said, his voice turning serious. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Is it about the dinner menu?" "No." Ethan reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a diamond watch. He pulled out a simple, elegant ring box. "It's about whether you would consider making this permanent, not as a nanny, but as my wife, as Lily's mother." Sarah stopped breathing for a second. The wind rustled through the trees. Lily's laughter echoed in the distance. "You don't have to answer now," Ethan started, suddenly nervous. "I know it's fast and—" "Ethan," Sarah interrupted him gently. She placed her hands on his chest. "You had me at the waffles." Ethan laughed, a sound of pure joy. He dropped to one knee, just like he had on the bus, but this time it wasn't in desperation. It was in devotion. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Sarah pulled him up and kissed him. It was a kiss that tasted of sunlight and second chances. In the distance, Lily stopped chasing the butterfly and looked back at them. She clapped her hands and yelled, "Mommy! Daddy!" Ethan broke the kiss and looked at his two girls. The billionaire had his fortune back, but it wasn't in the bank. It was right here, in the garden, safe and sound. "Come on," Ethan said, wrapping his arm around Sarah's waist. "Let's go get some dinner. I think Lily wants waffles." "Waffles for dinner?" Sarah laughed as they walked toward the house. "Why not?" Ethan smiled. "They perform miracles." The end.